Have you ever felt invisible, looked down upon simply because you had nothing? This is the story of a girl who once had everything talent, love, and big dreams. But in just one night, her world fell apart, and she had to become a maid just to survive. Unexpectedly, fate led her to a lavish wedding where she was humiliated and treated like a mere spectacle. But it was in that moment, pushed to the limits of her endurance, that a miracle happened. Join us to see how she turned disgrace into strength, and how an anonymous maid rose to become a star. Every morning in Westwood, California, always began with a symphony of light and solitude. The brilliant golden sunlight filtered through the large glass panes of the Bennett mansion, illuminating the gleaming marble tiles and the intricate wrought iron spiral staircase. But for Juliana Wilson, that light offered no warmth. It only highlighted the dust motes dancing in the air, motes she was tasked with cleaning, a constant reminder of her place. Juliana, 28, swept a feather duster across the towering bookshelves in the library laden with antique leather-bound books and architectural blueprints. She moved silently, her hand gently resting on her swelling baby bump, a protective instinct. In her 6th month of pregnancy, every movement was more cumbersome every day, an effort to remain invisible in a house that wasn't her own. This was the world of Phil John, a renowned tech millionaire who owned an empire of security software, and his fiancée, Barbara Vance. Juliana's life was supposed to have been different. A few years ago, she had been a familiar name in the Nashville music scene. Nights filled with soulful performances in small coffee shops, the applause of the crowd, and above all, the burning dream of one day standing on a grand stage. Her voice, a rare blend of country grit and bluesy depth, had even caught the attention of a small-time producer. But then, life took an unexpected turn. Jake, her musician boyfriend, vanished without a word right after she told him she was pregnant. A stalled career, a broken heart, and a life growing inside her, everything had collapsed. Juliana had fled Nashville, escaping her shattered dreams to find a place where she could start over, no matter how humbly. The mansion of Phil John was where she had found her refuge. Here, she lived in a small room in the basement where the hum of washing machines and dryers was a constant echo. A golden cage, Juliana thought, but a safe one. At the very least, this job gave her a stable income to care for her unborn baby, a child she was determined to love and protect above everything else in the world. Barbara Vance, Phil's fiancée, was a famous model with a flawless appearance and a harsh disposition. To her, Juliana's existence was purely to serve her own convenience. This morning, Juliana happened to pass by Barbara in the main hallway. Barbara was on the phone, her voice cold. "Yes, I need everything to be perfect. This wedding isn't just a party, it's a statement." When she saw Juliana, Barbara's eyes grew sharp. She spoke softly into the phone. "I'll call you back then," looked straight at Juliana, a contemptuous half-smile on her lips. "What are you doing here?" Barbara demanded, her voice low but full of authority. "I'm cleaning, ma'am," Juliana replied, trying to maintain her composure. "Cleaning happens inside the rooms. Try to stay out of my sight, will you? I don't want to see anything less than perfect before my big day." Juliana could only lower her head and retreat, a sense of humiliation welling up inside her. She backed into a corner as if a ghost until the sound of Barbara's heels had completely faded. Thankfully, Juliana wasn't entirely alone. Antonio, the kind-hearted head chef, was her only friend in the house. This morning, Antonio had prepared a plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and fruit, a meal he always made extra for Juliana. "You need to eat more," he said, handing her the plate. "Thank you, Antonio." "You don't have to do this," Juliana replied, her voice catching. "Of course I do." "You're eating for two," Antonio said with a gentle smile, looking at her belly. "How are you feeling?" "A little tired," Juliana admitted, "but fine." She felt Antonio's genuine concern. He was the one person who saw her not as a housekeeper but as a human being. Antonio also knew Barbara's nature well, and he feared that after the wedding things would only get worse. Meanwhile, in another corner of the mansion, Phil John stood in his study looking out at the garden. He was a successful man, yet his eyes held an ineffable sadness. His life seemed to be built on numbers and contracts, but it lacked real connection. The wedding to Barbara was a societal arrangement, a way to solidify his status, not the result of love. He knew Barbara wasn't the woman for him, but he was too weary to fight against the expectations of his family and society. Today, a helicopter had brought his mother Margaret to the mansion. Margaret was an elegant woman with a warm heart and a keen eye. She was the one who always noticed what others overlooked. She greeted Juliana with a genuine smile, asking about her health and the baby. "The little one must be very active by now, isn't she?" Margaret asked, her eyes full of empathy. Juliana smiled, her first true smile of the day. "Yes, ma'am, especially at night." Margaret had a close relationship with Phil, but she also worried for him. She knew her son wasn't happy. Phil's kindness toward Juliana wasn't an accident. It was a sign that he was searching for something else. That afternoon, while cleaning Phil's study, Juliana unknowingly began to hum a melody. It was a song she had written after Jake left, about overcoming pain and rising after loss. Her voice was natural and pure. Phil, who had entered the room without a sound, stood silently at the door listening. His eyes were no longer empty. They were filled with focus and a hint of surprise. He had heard many voices, but Juliana's touched a deep chord within him. When Juliana turned around and saw him, she was startled. "I'm sorry, Mr. John." "Don't be, Phil," said his voice warm. "You have a beautiful voice, Juliana." Juliana felt her cheeks flush. I used to sing a lot," she stammered, her gaze briefly sweeping over her belly. "You should sing more," Phil said. "A talent like that shouldn't be hidden away." But neither of them knew that in the hallway Barbara had witnessed the entire scene. Her eyes narrowed, and her sharp nails dug into her palm. The way Phil smiled at Juliana, the way he spoke to her, all planted a dangerous seed in Barbara's mind. A conspiracy was brewing, one that would change all their lives. Juliana once again was about to become the unsuspecting victim of a game she didn't even know she was playing. The days following that fateful moment in the library passed like an intense and haunting overture. Juliana no longer felt like an invisible ghost in the mansion. The looks Phil John gave her whenever their paths crossed were no longer just the casual attention of an employer. They held curiosity, appreciation, and an indescribable sadness that she could feel. He began to stop and talk, asking about her health and the baby. Once Phil saw her trying to lift a heavy bucket of water and immediately walked over, gently taking it from her. "Let me do that," he said, his voice warm and firm. "You shouldn't be doing such heavy work." Juliana felt flustered. She was not used to such kindness, especially after a year of living in solitude and indifference. Each gesture of care from Phil felt like a small knife to her heart, reminding her of what she once had and what she had lost. She remembered the days in Nashville when she and Jake, the baby's father, shared dreams and wrote songs together. Jake had also been this gentle with her until he learned she was pregnant. The warmth from Phil's hand brought her both relief and pain. The change in Phil's attitude did not escape Barbara's sharp eyes. The claws of jealousy began to scratch at her mind. Barbara wasn't just jealous of Phil. She was jealous of the talent Juliana possessed, something she could never have no matter how much money or status she commanded. Barbara had spent her life building a perfect facade, a meticulously arranged life. Yet Juliana had a simple beauty and a pure voice that could move hearts without even trying. One afternoon, the tension reached a peak. Juliana was cleaning the windows in the main living room when she heard Barbara on the phone with Julia Torres, the wedding planner. Barbara's voice was full of anger and she was almost shouting. "What do you mean? The singer cancelled." "The wedding is in just 2 days, Julia," Julia tried to explain calmly. "I'm so sorry, Barbara." The singer suddenly lost her voice. Her doctor confirmed it. "This is a disaster," Barbara shrieked. "Our first dance song was custom arranged for her voice. A recording would ruin everything." Just then, Juliana heard the calm voice of Margaret Phil's mother. She had just walked by and overheard the argument. "There is a solution, Barbara," she said softly. "I've heard Juliana sing. Her voice is beautiful and full of emotion. Simple, but very impressive." Juliana's heart pounded. She held her breath, listening. Barbara's eyes, which had been filled with rage and panic, suddenly fell on Juliana, and a calculating smile slowly spread across her face. "Oh, how interesting," she said. "I had no idea." That smile to Juliana was more terrifying than any fit of rage. It wasn't appreciation. It was calculation. She knew Barbara was hatching a plan. And she was right. As soon as the conversation ended, Juliana saw Barbara pull Julia into a secluded corner. She vaguely heard Barbara whisper, her voice full of a mysterious air. "Don't worry about the singer anymore. I found a perfect solution that can solve many problems at once. Just do what I say, and tomorrow will be a day to remember." Juliana saw Julia shake her head, her face filled with fear and apprehension. But Barbara was adamant. Julia looked at Juliana with a pitying gaze, a look that sent a shiver down Juliana's spine. The next day, Barbara unexpectedly appeared in the kitchen. "Good morning, Juliana," she said, her voice cloyingly sweet, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Juliana was wary. "I hear you have a beautiful voice. We've hit a little snag with the wedding singer. Could you help us out as a backup option?" Juliana was taken aback. "Me? Sing at your wedding, just as a backup," Barbara said persuasively. "I think this would mean a lot to Phil. He's been so kind to you, hasn't he? This is a chance for you to show your gratitude." Juliana felt cornered. Barbara's words sounded reasonable, but she knew something sinister was hidden within them. However, a small part of her yearned to sing again. Besides, she felt she owed Phil a genuine thank you. I think I can, if you really need me to." Wonderful, Barbara said, her smile radiant with triumph. "Hopefully we won't need you, but it's good to know we have a backup." After Barbara left, Juliana called Sarah, an old friend from Nashville. "She asked me to sing at her wedding," Juliana said, her voice filled with skepticism. "It's so strange. She's never been nice to me. Maybe she's finally seeing you as a person instead of the help," Sarah said. "I don't think so," Juliana replied, though a glimmer of fragile hope remained in her heart. "But maybe this is an opportunity. If I do well, maybe Phil will introduce me to some people in the industry." Juliana's unease did not fade. Over the next few days, she noticed Barbara's calculating looks, the whispers and giggles from the bridesmaids. She felt an inexplicable sense of foreboding. One night, Juliana overheard Barbara telling Julia, "Everything is set just as we planned. Tomorrow will be an unforgettable day for everyone." Juliana and Julia's eyes met. In Julia's gaze, she saw a look of pity, a chilling sensation. Juliana knew something was wrong. Very wrong. The wedding day arrived. Early in the morning, Juliana was already up. The baby inside her seemed to sense her tension kicking repeatedly. Dressed in her simple black dress and a white apron, Juliana knew it would be a long and tiring day. "We'll get through this, my love," she whispered, her hand on her belly. At the club where the wedding was being held, everything was sparkling and perfect. White roses, crystal chandeliers, and lavishly decorated dining tables. Antonio noticed her fatigue and prepared a small corner in the kitchen for her to rest. "You shouldn't be on your feet so much," he said, handing her a stack of napkins to fold. "Thank you, Antonio," Juliana said, grateful for his concern. "I'll earn $250 if I stay until the end, almost enough to buy a crib for the baby." Phil unexpectedly appeared in the kitchen. He was dressed in casual attire, not looking like a man about to get married. He saw Juliana sitting alone in the corner, her face weary. "Hello, Juliana. Are you doing okay?" "I'm fine, Mr. John." "You look very tired. Are you sure you should be working so hard? It'll be tough on you." "I need the money," Juliana said simply, but Phil heard the determination in her voice. He understood. He nodded. "Get some rest when you can. Your health and the baby's are what's most important." He looked at her, a fleeting smile on his lips that didn't reach his eyes, which held a deep sadness. The big day. Yes, the big day. Juliana watched him go, wondering why such a wealthy and kind man didn't look happy on his most important day. The crystal chandeliers sparkled like 1,000 stars on the ceiling of the Brentwood Country Club, creating a scene of overwhelming luxury. Hundreds of guests, celebrities, financial tycoons, and influential figures chatted happily over champagne flutes, each a perfect piece of a high society tableau. For Juliana Wilson, this wasn't a party. It was a stage where she felt like a background actor, lost in her black uniform and growing baby bump. Though she tried to be invisible, curious, and judgmental eyes occasionally glanced at her as if to say, "What is that maid doing here?" A dull backache tormented Juliana, but the anxiety in her heart was far worse. She felt something unnatural in the air, a subtle tension she couldn't explain. She saw Antonio the chef standing in a hidden corner, his face full of worry. She also saw Julia Torres, the wedding planner, glide past with a look of guilt and pity, a glance that sent a chill down Juliana's spine. After dinner, music swelled to signal the first dance. Juliana watched Phil and Barbara walk onto the dance floor. Barbara, in her magnificent wedding gown, was radiant like a queen. Phil, in his elegant black tuxedo, looked distant and empty. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and Juliana felt a surge of sadness. She knew that even at the peak of his success, Phil was a lonely man trapped by others' expectations. Suddenly, Barbara whispered something to Julia, who rushed to the band. Juliana held her breath, listening from her corner in the kitchen. The musicians looked flustered, shaking their heads and shrugging as if there had been a snag. A flash of anger crossed Barbara's perfect face, but she quickly regained her composure, a fake smile returning to her lips. She headed toward Juliana. "Juliana," Barbara called out, her voice suspiciously sweet. "How lucky you're here. We've run into a little trouble. Our singer doesn't know the first dance song." "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am," Juliana replied, her guard up. "I need your help," Barbara said, her eyes filled with faint pleading. "Phil's mother said you have a beautiful voice. Could you sing for us? It would mean so much to Phil." Juliana felt an alarm bell ringing in her head. She looked at Antonio, who was standing nearby, with a warning gaze. "I can't. I don't know that song." "It's a very simple ballad," Barbara insisted, pulling a piece of paper from her dress and handing it to her. "Here are the lyrics. The band knows the music. You just need to sing." Juliana felt cornered. Barbara's words seemed reasonable, but she knew something dreadful was lurking beneath the surface. Yet a small part of her yearned to sing again. Besides, she felt she owed Phil a sincere thank you. "Just one song, then?" she asked. "Just one song," Barbara confirmed, a triumphant smile blooming on her face. Julia appeared, taking Juliana's hand and leading her away. Juliana scanned the lyrics. It was about eternal love and commitment, a song completely foreign to her current emotions. As they walked through the deserted hallways, Juliana asked Julia, "Do I have time to rehearse with the band? Is there a proper mic on stage?" Julia didn't answer, her eyes evasive. Everything will be fine, she said, but her voice trembled. As they neared the dance floor, Juliana saw the band shuffling through sheet music in confusion. A violinist shook his head at the pianist, shrugging in bewilderment. They were not at all prepared for her. Juliana saw Barbara standing at a distance, smiling victoriously at her bridesmaids. She had planned this all. This was not an opportunity. It was a trap. Juliana felt her whole body go cold and her stomach clenched. She wanted to turn and run, but 2 security guards blocked her path. Miss Bennet requested that you stay for the performance, one said, his voice firm. Juliana trembled. This is a humiliation. I can't do it. It was too late though. Barbara took the microphone from the band leader. The music stopped, and 300 pairs of eyes turned toward Juliana. Hello everyone, Barbara said, her mocking voice echoing through the hall. We have a special treat for you. Our little maid here thinks she can sing for us. The entire room fell silent. Some people looked confused, others amused. The bridesmaids giggled. Juliana stood there in her uniform with her large baby bump, every eye on her. She heard whispers. Who does this maid think she is? She looks so scared, poor thing. Humiliation washed over her. Juliana slowly stepped onto the stage. Her legs were shaking and the baby kicked hard as if sensing her mother's tension. The stage lights were too bright. There was no music stand, no proper microphone. Barbara handed her a mic, whispering maliciously, "Don't embarrass yourself too much." Juliana stood alone on stage facing hundreds of wealthy strangers. Overwhelming fear consumed her. She held the piece of paper in her hand. The song Barbara had given her had high notes she hadn't been able to hit in years. It was chosen for her to fail. In that moment, Juliana made a decision. She would not sing Barbara's song. She would sing her own. I'm going to sing a different song, she told the band leader, her voice trembling but resolute. One that I wrote. Just a simple rhythm, 4 beats, very slow. The musician nodded. Juliana closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. She thought about her journey from a hopeful singer to a single mother, about the heartbreak and pain. She thought about her daughter who would one day hear this story. The drums began a steady beat. Juliana opened her eyes, looking straight into the crowd. This song is called Rise from the Ashes, she said softly into the mic. Juliana's voice was soft at first, almost breaking with emotion. When dreams turn to dust and the music goes silent. When the one you trusted leaves you broken and alone. But then her voice grew stronger, filling the hall with unexpected power. Sometimes you have to fall so you can rise higher. From the ashes, you find the fire that was buried deep inside. The room was completely silent. The whispers stopped. Even the servers stood still, trays in hand, listening. Juliana's voice was clear and strong, conveying both pain and hope. The band, sensing something extraordinary happening, began to join in. The pianist found the right chords and the violinist added a gentle, perfect melody. Phil stood in the back, his expression changing from bewilderment to awe. He watched Juliana transform from an invisible maid into a queen on stage, her voice filling every corner of the room. Barbara's smile was gone. She stood frozen next to Phil, her face darkening as her plan completely unraveled. This was supposed to be a moment of humiliation, not triumph. As Juliana sang the last note, her voice soared to a high key, giving many people goosebumps. I'll rise from the ashes stronger than before. I'll rise from the ashes and I won't fall anymore. When she finished, the hall was silent for 3 seconds. Then, as if by magic, applause erupted. A few people stood up, giving a genuine standing ovation. A woman in the front row wiped a tear away. Juliana stood there stunned. She had expected mockery, not a standing ovation. In that moment, she felt like herself again, a singer with dreams. That moment was shattered when Barbara pushed past the musicians and snatched the mic from Juliana's hand. Wasn't that just lovely? Barbara said with a fake sweetness. Now back to the kitchen where you belong. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. An uncomfortable murmur spread. The cruelty in Barbara's words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Juliana felt a pang of hurt. Despite the applause, she tried to salvage what was left of her dignity, backing away. In her haste to leave the stage, she didn't notice a small puddle of water, spilled earlier and not cleaned up. Her foot slipped and Juliana fell hard to the floor, a small cry escaping her lips as she tried to protect her belly. The audience gasped in unison. Phil rushed toward the stage. "Juliana," he called out, his voice filled with concern. "Are you okay?" Barbara stood by the mic, her voice full of anger. "Phil, we need to continue our first dance. The staff can handle this." But Phil completely ignored her. He climbed onto the stage and knelt beside Juliana. "Where do you hurt? Is the baby okay?" he asked, his hand gently touching her shoulder. Juliana tried to sit up, groaning in pain. "I think so. I just need a minute." Antonio ran over with a glass of water and a clean towel. He knelt next to Juliana, his face full of worry. "Take deep breaths," he advised. "Don't try to move." Barbara's voice grew louder. "Phil, everyone is waiting. This is our wedding." The entire room watched as Phil completely disregarded his new bride. His focus was entirely on Juliana helping her sit up gently. "Can someone get a chair?" Phil called out. Two waiters quickly brought one over. With Phil's help, Juliana sat down, her hands still protectively on her belly. "I'm so sorry this happened," Phil said softly to Juliana. "I had no idea." Barbara stormed over, her white gown sweeping the floor. "Phil, this is ridiculous. This is our first dance. You can't leave me for the maid." The whole room fell silent again as everyone watched the drama unfold. Barbara's words exposed her true character. Phil slowly stood up, facing his new wife. His eyes, once worried, turned cold and hard. "Enough, Barbara," he said, his voice low but authoritative. "Enough. She's ruining everything," Barbara shrieked. As Phil was about to reply, Antonio stepped forward, his phone held high. "I think everyone should know what really happened here tonight," he said loudly. Antonio held the phone higher as Barbara tried to snatch it. "What are you doing?" Barbara screamed, her face flushed with rage. Showing everyone the truth, Antonio replied calmly. He pressed a button on the screen and put it on speaker. Barbara's voice rang out clearly. "I can't wait to see that little girl make a fool of herself. I told security not to let her leave the stage. She'll know her place." A murmur went through the room. The recording continued with Barbara's laughter. "Phil will never know I set her up. He'll just think she embarrassed herself for attention." Barbara's face turned white. "That's not true. The recording is edited. He doctored it. I recorded it this morning when you were talking to your bridesmaids in the kitchen," Antonio said, his voice calm. "I knew you were planning something cruel." Phil stood motionless, his face growing harder as he listened. Margaret, his mother, walked onto the stage, her eyes filled with disappointment for her new daughter-in-law. "Is this true, Barbara?" Phil asked, his voice icy. "Of course not. It's obviously fake." Barbara grabbed Phil's arm. "You'll believe a maid over your own wife." Juliana remained seated in the chair, one hand on her belly, the pain from the fall still throbbing, but she cared more about the baby than anything else. Phil gently removed Barbara's hand from his arm. Without a word, he raised his left hand and slowly took off his wedding ring. That simple action created an absolute silence in the room. "What are you doing?" Barbara whispered, her voice suddenly filled with fear. "This marriage is over," Phil said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. It was a mistake that thankfully only lasted less than 2 hours. "You can't be serious," Barbara said. For a common maid, Phil looked straight at Barbara. "This isn't about Juliana. This is about who you are. It always has been, but I refuse to see it." He turned to the guests. "I apologize for this situation. The party is over. Please understand that this is for the best." Mike, Phil's best friend, came over with a security guard. Medical team is on the way, he said to Phil. Phil turned to Juliana kneeling beside her chair. How are you feeling? The pain is getting worse, Juliana said softly. I'm worried about the baby. Barbara's parents rushed over. Mrs. Clark hugged her daughter while Mr. Clark confronted Phil. You can't just annul a marriage like that. There are legal processes. We can discuss the legalities tomorrow, Phil replied firmly. Right now, I'm only concerned about Juliana's well-being. Barbara suddenly burst into tears. Her perfect bride image completely shattered. This is humiliating. How could you do this to me on our wedding day? How could you do that to another human being? Margaret asked, stepping closer to Barbara. That young woman is pregnant and you deliberately plotted to humiliate her in front of everyone. The crowd began to disperse. Some looked embarrassed, others were secretly thrilled. Expensive wedding gifts sat on the tables forgotten. The paramedics arrived, pushing a stretcher through the crowd. They quickly checked on Juliana, taking her blood pressure and asking about her condition. Any bleeding? Any unusual discharge, one asked. No, just pain on my right side where I fell, Juliana replied. The paramedic helped her onto the stretcher. We'll take you to the hospital to get checked out. With a pregnant woman, we don't take any risks. Phil stood nearby. I want to go with her, he said. Are you a relative? They asked. Before Phil could answer, Barbara screamed from behind. He's my husband. He's not going anywhere with her. Phil turned back to look at Barbara one last time. No, I'm not your husband. The papers were never filed and they never will be. He turned back to the paramedics. I am her employer, and I feel responsible for what happened tonight. All right, sir, the paramedic said. You can follow us in your own car. As they wheeled Juliana out, Antonio came close to her. I'll go to your room and pack your things. You shouldn't go back there while she's still in the house. Thank you, Juliana whispered, tears finally falling. I'm so sorry for causing this. Don't be sorry, Antonio said firmly. You did nothing wrong. And hey, your singing was beautiful. Margaret also came to Juliana's side. I'll make sure your belongings are safe, she promised. And I'll visit you tomorrow. As the ambulance rolled away, Juliana looked through the doors, seeing Barbara still standing there in her wedding gown surrounded by her bridesmaids and parents. The perfect wedding had dissolved into thin air. Phil spoke to Mike, then walked toward his car to follow the ambulance. As he passed Barbara, she screamed, "You're choosing a maid over your wife!" Her voice was filled with disbelief. Phil stopped. You were never my wife. This marriage ended before it ever began. He continued walking, adding, just like your social standing in this city after tonight. The wail of the ambulance siren tore through the quiet of the Brentwood night. Juliana lay on the gurney, one hand on her baby bump, the pain from the fall replaced by a crushing fear. She no longer cared about the humiliation she had just endured, or the prying eyes of the crowd. Her mind was focused on one thing only, her baby. With every minor contraction, she flinched, terrified something had gone wrong. She whispered prayers to herself, unconsciously begging any god to protect her unborn daughter. The ambulance came to a stop in front of Cedar Sinai Hospital. Phil John was already there. He stood waiting at the emergency room entrance, his face etched with worry and tension. His hair disheveled and his tie loosened. He was no longer the picture of a perfect millionaire, but just a man concerned for a woman and her child. Juliana was wheeled into the emergency room. The doctors and nurses worked professionally and quickly, placing her on a gurney, taking her blood pressure and running tests. Juliana tried to answer their questions, but her mind was floating, dreading a verdict. Phil stood in the corner of the room, silent but watching her every move. He didn't leave for a moment, even though he had hundreds of calls and messages waiting. He was there, a steady pillar, a presence that made Juliana feel strangely safe. After an hour of anxious waiting, an OB/GYN walked in, offering a reassuring smile. "Everything is fine, Juliana," she said. "We've checked everything thoroughly. The baby's heartbeat is strong, and there are no signs of bleeding or serious injury." Juliana felt as if the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. Tears of relief streamed down her face. "Thank God," she whispered. Phil moved closer, his face also relaxing. "Thank you, doctor," he said, his voice full of gratitude. "We don't know what we would have done if anything had happened." The doctor looked at Phil and Juliana, her eyes warm. "She just needs rest. It will take a few days for her body to recover. I'll prescribe some mild pain medication. It's best if she stays overnight for observation." After the doctor left, Phil sat in the chair next to her bed. He looked at Juliana, his eyes filled with remorse. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry for what Barbara did. I had no idea she could be so cruel." "It's not your fault," Juliana said, her voice trembling. "You did everything you could." "I should have known," Phil said, blaming himself. "I ignored the signs. I was so busy with work, with building a perfect image, that I didn't realize who I was getting involved with. And that caused you to suffer." Juliana looked at Phil. She saw the sincerity in his eyes. "Honestly, Phil, I'm okay." "No, you're not," Phil said, "and you didn't deserve what happened. Your performance, it was extraordinary. You have a huge talent, Juliana. I can't let it be buried in a luxurious house and a woman's cruelty." Juliana didn't say anything. She had heard these words before, but never from a man like Phil. He wasn't a producer or a talent scout. He was a wealthy man who had just called off his wedding to protect her. Phil stood up. "I want to help you," he said. "I'll help you rebuild your music career. I can introduce you to some people in the industry. I know them. You deserve a second chance." Juliana was stunned. Are you serious?" "I am," Phil said. "What's more, I have a guest house. You and the baby can move in there. It will be more comfortable than that basement room. After you're discharged, I'll have someone come and arrange your things." At this, Juliana couldn't hold back her tears. She didn't know what to say. She just nodded. "Thank you, Phil," she said, her voice choked. "I don't know how I can ever repay you. Sing for the world. That's how you can repay me." Phil said, a warm smile appearing on his lips. "Now get some rest." The next morning, Phil returned to the hospital. He drove Juliana to the mansion to get her belongings. It felt strange to step into the house that had once been her workplace. Antonio and Margaret were already there waiting for her. Both had carefully packed Juliana's things, each item neatly arranged in boxes. "We've cleared out your room," Antonio said. "You definitely don't want to go back there." "Thank you both so much," Juliana said, her heart full of gratitude. Suddenly, Barbara appeared. Her face was haggard, her eyes swollen, and her wedding dress had been replaced with casual clothes. But her arrogance remained. Her parents stood behind her, their faces filled with shame. "What are you doing?" Barbara shrieked. "Are you stealing my things?" "We're just getting Juliana's belongings, ma'am," Phil said, his voice cold. "And this is no longer your home." "What are you talking about?" Barbara cried. "You can't do this to me. You ruined my reputation." Phil looked straight into Barbara's eyes. "You ruined your own reputation, Barbara. The moment you decided to humiliate a pregnant woman for your own amusement, you lost all my respect and everyone else's here." "But we were the perfect couple," Barbara whispered, her voice breaking. "We had everything." "We only had a facade," Phil said firmly. "I no longer want to live in that facade. I want sincerity, and I found it in a place I never expected to." He looked at Juliana, his eyes full of meaning. Barbara followed his gaze and understood. She screamed in a mix of fury and helplessness. "You're choosing a common maid over me. You'll regret this." "I have no regrets," Phil replied. "I only regret that I didn't do it sooner." Phil drove Juliana to his guest house. It was a charming little cottage, nestled in a quiet garden, with large windows overlooking a sparkling pool. Juliana stepped inside, her heart overflowing with emotion. It wasn't a cold basement room, but a warm place filled with light and hope. "This is your home now," Phil said. "Rest up and get your strength back. We'll talk about music later." The small guest house of Phil John, tucked away behind ancient eucalyptus trees, had become Juliana's sanctuary. It wasn't a cold basement room, but a cozy, sun-filled haven. Every morning, Juliana woke up to the sound of birds, and instead of the hum of laundry machines, she could hear the gentle crash of waves in the distance. Her life in just one night had completely changed. From an invisible maid, she had become a guest, treated with respect and sincerity. The first few days were a blur. Juliana still had the habit of working, but Phil gently stopped her. He had hired a cleaning and security crew to ensure she had her privacy. He and his mother Margaret visited often, bringing food and words of encouragement. They never spoke of the incident that had happened, only of the future. A week after the wedding, Phil knocked on her door. He wasn't in his usual tailored suits, but a simple t-shirt and jeans. He brought a laptop and a professional microphone. "Juliana," he said, "it's time we talked about music." Juliana felt nervous. She hadn't sung in a professional setting since leaving Nashville. "I don't know," she said. "I think I might have lost my spark." "No, you haven't," Phil insisted. "Your voice can't be lost. It's a part of you. I contacted Sam Jackson, a talented music producer. He heard the recording of your performance and was very impressed." Juliana was stunned. He heard the recording, yes. "He wants to meet you," Phil said. "He said your voice has a rare authenticity, something that can't be found in young singers today." The meeting with Sam Jackson took place at Phil's guest house. Sam, a gray-haired man with experienced eyes, was unlike any producer Juliana had ever met. He didn't talk about money or fame, but simply listened to Juliana sing. Juliana, with her growing baby bump, sat on the sofa and sang "Rise from the Ashes." Her voice now carrying not only the pain of the past, but also the strength of the present, filled the room with emotion. When she finished, Sam was silent for a moment. Then he smiled broadly. "That's the music I've been looking for all these years," he said. "It has a story. It has a soul. We're going to record it." The following weeks were a busy but inspired blur. Phil had transformed a part of the guest house into a small studio with temporary soundproofing and basic equipment. Juliana spent her time perfecting her song, adding new lyrics and new emotions. Each day, she felt a creative energy flowing within her. Writing was no longer a pain, but a way for her to heal her wounded heart and prepare for a new future. Meanwhile, Barbara and her family were facing a media firestorm. Antonio's recording had gone viral in high society circles. The wedding guests who had witnessed Barbara's cruelty sided with Phil. Her reputation collapsed, and major sponsors withdrew their funding from her family's charitable foundation. Finally, to avoid further trouble, Barbara's parents decided to take her back to New York. "She's gone," Phil told Juliana one evening when he came to visit. "She won't bother you again." Juliana felt a huge sense of relief. Her life could finally begin again, free from Barbara's haunting shadow. One quiet Tuesday night, Juliana woke up to a sharp pain. The baby was moving more forcefully than ever. She quickly called Phil. "Phil," she said, her voice trembling, I think the baby is coming." Phil arrived immediately. He drove Juliana to Cedars-Sinai Hospital. All the way there, he held her hand tightly. Juliana looked at him, her eyes full of gratitude. "You don't have to be here," she said between contractions. "I'll be okay." "I'm not going anywhere," Phil said, his voice resolute. "I'll stay." After 6 hours of labor, Juliana gave birth to a healthy baby girl, weighing over 7 pounds. The baby had a tuft of black hair and bright eyes. Juliana held her in her arms, feeling her warmth and scent. Tears of joy streamed down her face. The baby had arrived, bringing a new breeze, a great hope. She's a miracle," Juliana whispered. "Does the baby have a name yet?" the nurse asked with a smile. Juliana looked down at her daughter and an idea came to her. "Lily," she said. "Her name is Lily Wilson." The next day, Phil, Margaret, Antonio, and Mike all came to the hospital. They brought gifts and best wishes. Margaret looked at baby Lily, her eyes filled with affection. Lily, what a beautiful name, she said. Phil stood there watching Juliana holding her daughter, an image that deeply moved him. From a humiliated maid, Juliana had risen to become a strong mother and a talented artist. After everyone had left, Phil stayed behind. I talked to Sam, he said. He said the record label loves your song. They want to release it as soon as possible. Juliana looked down at her daughter, feeling that everything was happening too fast. 2 months ago, I was just a maid, she said, and now I have a daughter and a chance to become a singer. Life changes fast, doesn't it? Phil said, smiling. And it did. Juliana's life had changed from a mournful ballad into a symphony of hope and new promises. The weeks after baby Lily was born were a whirlwind of emotions and changes. Juliana spent all her time embracing motherhood, learning to care for and love this tiny being. Lily became her endless source of inspiration. The pain of the past didn't disappear, but it was now overshadowed by an immense happiness. One quiet evening after Lily was fast asleep in the crib that Antonio and Margaret had bought, Phil came to visit. He had transformed the spare room into a more complete recording studio, with professional soundproofing and microphones. Sam wants you to record the final vocals next week, Phil said, his voice full of excitement. He says the record label is eager to release the song. Juliana felt a wave of anxiety. So soon, I haven't fully recovered. Phil sat down beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. They're incredibly impressed with your story. A talented singer humiliated at a millionaire's wedding who rises with her own voice and becomes a strong mother. That's a powerful narrative, Juliana. It's golden marketing in this industry. Juliana frowned, not liking the idea. I don't want to be turned into a victim to gain attention. Don't worry, Phil reassured her. I've talked to them. They'll focus on your talent and resilience, not on exploiting the scandal. In the following days, Juliana began recording. She balanced caring for Lily with her work in the studio. Sam had installed a small monitor, so Juliana could see Lily even while singing. I once thought I would never sing again, she told Phil once, and now I'm singing with my daughter right beside me. Juliana's voice after becoming a mother had a new depth and emotion. It was no longer the voice of a hopeful young girl, but the voice of a woman who had gone through loss, pain, and found happiness. As expected, Rise from the Ashes was released and immediately became a sensation. The song not only played on the radio, but Juliana's story also spread across music blogs and magazines. In less than a month, the song entered the top 25, then the top 10 of the Billboard charts. Every day, Phil would come to the guest house phone in hand with messages and calls from Sam Jackson. 7 days after its release, your song was number 25. He announced, his voice filled with excitement. After 10 days, it entered the top 15, and today, it's number 3 on Billboard. Juliana couldn't believe her ears. Everything was happening too fast, too unexpectedly. She looked around. Everyone was there: Phil, Margaret, Antonio, Mike. They had all become a family, not by blood, but by trust and love. I couldn't have done this without you all, she said, her voice choked with emotion. Especially you, Phil. You believed in me from the very beginning. You did it all, Juliana, Phil said. I just recognized what you've always had. Your talent and strength were always there. I was just lucky enough to witness it. After everyone left, Juliana found Phil sitting on the terrace watching the stars. She sat down beside him, a sense of peace washing over her. I think it's time for me to find my own place, she said, her voice sincere. Phil turned to her surprised. You don't have to go anywhere. You can stay here as long as you like. I know, and I'm so grateful, Juliana said. But with the success of the song, I can afford to buy a little house for Lily and me. We need our own space to build our lives. Phil looked at her, trying to hide the disappointment in his eyes. I understand, he said. That makes perfect sense. That night they sat together under the starlit sky, two people who had become connected in a strange and wonderful way. Juliana knew that even if she moved away, their relationship would never end. Phil had become an indispensable part of her life, a friend, a mentor, and something more. The moment was interrupted by a call from his lawyer. Barbara and her family are trying to spread rumors about us, Phil said after hanging up. They're saying we had a relationship before the wedding. Juliana smiled. The truth is a terrifying thing for liars, isn't it? It is, Phil said. And the truth is on our side. 6 months had passed since Rise from the Ashes was released, and Juliana Wilson's life had become a whirlwind of change. Her song not only hit the Billboard Top 10, but also received praise from music critics and renowned artists. Juliana, from an anonymous maid, had become a musical sensation. However, amidst the glitz and glamour of fame, she continued to face new challenges. One spring morning, Juliana sat in her cozy little kitchen in Studio City, a home she had purchased with the royalties from her song. Although the house wasn't lavish, it gave her a sense of safety and freedom she had never known. 9-month-old Lily was playing on the floor, her giggles occasionally echoing through the room. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Juliana opened the door to find Phil John standing there, holding a potted plant and a small gift box. Housewarming gift, he said with a bright smile. This plant is easy to care for, perfect for a busy mom. Juliana laughed and invited him in. Although she had moved out, Phil continued to visit frequently, bringing toys for Lily, helping her with career decisions and simply being there for her. Your home is beautiful, Phil said, kneeling beside Lily, and the baby immediately reached out her tiny hand to grab his finger. Hello, little one. Do you like your new house? When Juliana opened Phil's gift, she found a carefully framed copy of the Billboard chart, showing her song at number 3. I thought you'd want to remember this moment, Phil said as he stood up. Your first hit. Juliana was touched. Sometimes I think I'll wake up and find myself cleaning at your mansion again. Never, Phil said. You're a rising star, Juliana. Just then, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Antonio carrying a large pot of homemade soup. For the new homeowner, he said, with his gentle smile. Not long after, Margaret arrived bringing baby supplies. The small house suddenly became cozier than ever, filled with the laughter and care of true friends. However, amidst the joy, Juliana received a letter from a lawyer. Her heart sank as she read the contents. Jake Miller Lily's father had filed for custody. He can't do that, Juliana said, her voice trembling. He's never even met her. Unfortunately, he can try, Phil said. But his case is very weak. He's claiming that since he is stable, he deserves to be a father. Stable, Juliana gave a bitter laugh. He means he saw I was successful and wants access to the money. Phil squeezed her hand. Don't worry, I'll get you the best lawyer. He kept his promise. After a tense confrontation at the law office, Jake agreed to a settlement in Juliana's favor, including supervised visits and child support, which quickly made him lose interest in his fatherly role. A few months later, Juliana received an incredible offer. The Hollywood Bowl, one of the most prestigious music venues, wanted her to headline a concert. She was nervous, but with Phil's encouragement, she accepted. On the night of the show, Juliana stood in her dressing room looking out at the thousands of people filling the Hollywood Bowl. She was trembling, overwhelmed by fear. Just then, Phil walked in carrying a sleeping Lily in his arms. Someone wanted to wish her mom good luck, he said, his voice full of affection. Juliana held her daughter, feeling her warmth and scent. I'm scared, Phil. I'm scared I'll mess it all up. You won't, Phil said with confidence. You were born for this, Just sing as if you're singing for yourself and for those who love you. He took her hand. Our foundation, the Lily Foundation, just approved its first 10 grants. Talented single parents will get the help they need. Your journey inspired it all. Tears welled up in Juliana's eyes. Really, really, Phil said. Your life is already helping others, Juliana. Standing in the wings, Juliana heard the announcer introduce her. She walked out, the spotlight shining down on her, and applause erupted from the thousands of people. In that moment, her fear vanished. She saw Phil in the front row holding Lily on his shoulder, both of them smiling and waving at her. Juliana began to sing. She sang about shattered dreams, pain, and loss. And she sang about resilience, about finding light when everything seemed to have fallen apart. She sang Rise from the Ashes. And thousands of people sang along, their voices echoing through the amphitheater. When she finished, the entire audience rose to their feet, giving a standing ovation. Juliana bowed, tears of happiness streaming down her face. She had done it. She had overcome everything. After the show, Phil met her backstage with Lily still sleeping soundly in his arms. "You were incredible," he said. "I couldn't have done it without you," Juliana said, her voice filled with emotion. Phil looked down at Lily, then at Juliana. "I realized something tonight. Some people come into our lives as employees, some as bosses, but the luckiest of us find something neither of them was looking for, a perfect harmony." Juliana smiled, leaning into his embrace, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, the pressures of fame, the balance of career and motherhood, she would overcome them all. She had found strength in her voice, and a family she had never dared to dream of right when she thought she had lost everything. And that's how Juliana Wilson rose from the ashes. Her story isn't just about finding her voice again. It's about finding the inner strength to stand up after a fall. If you've ever felt like you've lost all hope, remember Juliana's story. Sometimes a breakdown isn't the end, it's the beginning of an even greater journey. What do you think of this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss our next inspiring story.